Hi, welcome to STL Startup Week and the GeoInnovation Speaker Series. This is the 8th and final event of the speaker series for the calendar year 2021. And we are very excited to have you here today. My name is Tara Mott. I'm one of the USGIF St. Louis area co-chairs here in St. Louis. I work for Esri supporting NGA, so I've been in this community for about 8 years and it's been fantastic. Today, we're going to be talking about more of the startups and the geospatial startup ecosystem, again, during this STL Startup Week. As a reminder, the GeoInnovation Speakers Series is a collaboration between innovation hubs like Cortex and the T-Rex, as well as GeoFutures. Typically, we talk about geospatial in St. Louis, and we usually think of NGA because it's kind of that big player in town, but really geospatial touches so much more and so many more industries. And so again, we've talked about a wide range of industries during this whole during this series. And again, but this is our last of 2021. We wanted to talk to startups because they're really the ones bringing some of this new technology to market within the St. Louis geospatial community. And as many of you already know, we do have a unique and interesting support system for specifically for startups here. So I have 4 fantastic startups that are here with me, and I will go through each of them one by one and have them take 2 to 3 minutes to introduce themselves and a little bit about their company. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with Dan Kuster from Cambrio.
Hey, thanks, Tara. So I'm Dan, founder CEO of Cambrio, and we build powerful data flow automation with a particular focus in geospatial. So what that means is as data about our world increases, Earth is a big and complex place. The growth of data demands a growth in analysis capability. Being able to do this has a lot of complexity, right? So we simplify that process and provide a common fabric so that the analysts who are trying to do these deep contextualized detections are able to do so on problem of interest at scale, on relevant kind of have a path into deploying the thing, right? So for NGA in particular, this looks like satellite image analysis for specific things that get detected repeatedly over time over Earth for some kind of scenario of interest. I'll also put a plug in that we are deeply engaged and interested in things like open source capability and open data, and have a hand in generating some of the biggest and most interesting geospatial data sets that you may all be familiar with. So.
All right, well, thank you, Dan. All right, let's move over now to Brad Martin, co-founder and CEO of Another Reality Studio.
Yeah, hey everybody, my name is Brad Martin. I started Another Reality Studio in 2013, and we bring immersive technologies to the geospatial industry, along with some other industries as well. So what we're trying to do is bring augmented reality and virtual reality immersive technologies, meaning that we use either a headset to fully immerse a person into a virtual space, or something like an iPad or a phone to bring virtual elements to the real world. And the reason that we do that in the geospatial industry is we take all this data that other companies are collecting, like my fellow 3 panelists here. We take all that data and we bring it in a way that is very easy to visualize and to understand and to do something with. So all that data that you collected, what do you do with it? So we bring applications into your internal workflows for training with that data, or by visualizing that data so that you are better prepared for the things that you do. With Another Reality, we also do work for architecture, engineering, and for education. But all of our technology that we built around really pairs very well with geospatial. So I'm very excited to be a part of this board, and I appreciate it.
All right, thanks so much, Brad. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to move over now to Ed Gee, from co-founder and CEO of Stratadyne.
Hey everyone, my name is Ed. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Stratadyne. essentially, what we do at Stratodyn is we use high altitude balloons to collect satellite imagery at a much higher resolution than any existing satellite can offer, and at a much lower cost. This basically enables us to gather, let's say, testing data over a certain area at much lower cost compared to in the past, perform monitoring missions, surveillance missions, security missions, as well as climate research and supporting other causes. So my background is in satellite research. I used to do work as part of the University NanoSat program at the University of Missouri, but we've also been really branching out into developing more and more applications on the imagery analytics side of things.
All right, thank you, Ed. And our final panelist, Michael Nabor, from Submerse, and he is local here in St. Louis. So go ahead, Michael.
Hi, everyone. I am Michael Nabor. I am the technical founder and CEO of Submerse. At Submerse, we create synthetic data for AI and computer vision. So basically, whenever you want to teach an AI algorithm to detect something, you need a lot of training data or examples of that data. And instead of using real world data, we create basically fake pictures that can teach a real world AI algorithm. So I am excited to be here.
Thank you, Michael. All right, well, so you guys have all told us a little bit about your company, a tiny bit maybe about your customers. Sorry. But when you guys first started your company, just think about this. Did you have geospatial in mind already, or were you more interested in focusing on solving that specific problem? I'm going to start with Michael because it sounds like he knows, because he says a lot of you guys are looking for training data. I'm going to grab a little sip of water. So.
Yeah, sure. So how I, started Submerse was that I was trying to do machine learning on commercial satellite imagery in college. And being a college student, I didn't have the money to buy a lot of commercial satellite pictures. And so, a friend of mine and we made fake satellite pictures and used that to train an AI. And it was a very simple use case. But that was the spark that said that, okay, synthetic data is a really interesting topic because it solves a lot of the bottlenecks of data. And so that's why, we transitioned our business to become a real startup instead of kind of a university project.
I love that, Michael. That is, yeah, you're like, we needed it. So we just started creating. We're like, hey, we could do a business this way. So I think that's a fantastic way. So moving over, Brad. Again, were you thinking about geospatial in mind prior to starting it, or was it kind of you were doing that problem and then you realized how you could be getting involved in geospatial?
Yeah, well, Michael, I've talked to you before, but every time I hear your story, I just think it's awesome that a company was built out of this idea of we need this, but we can't afford it. That you can just build a company off that. So I love the thought process there. Yeah, so actually, I did not have geospatial industry in mind at all when I started doing Another Reality Studio. So I studied architecture. I was very focused on how do I portray these spaces to people in an immersive way so they don't just see an image or they don't just see a video, but how do they actually experience the space before it's built? And then actually, after graduating and working at a firm for a couple of years, I realized that AR and VR, or augmented virtual reality, have much more potential than just architecture. And so that's when I quit my job and kind of took the risk and said, you know what, there's people out there that will pay for these services and I'm just going to find them. So I've actually, as a consultancy agency, I've actually, spanned across many different industries, but one of the best and most beneficial industries has been geospatial. And so the reason for that is we can actually take real world data or synthetic data like Michael's creating and bring a use case for those companies to immersively train these people in it. So although it was not something that we had in mind at the beginning, it's actually been a very pivotal thing for the work that we do. And the immersive technologies just pair so well with geospatial that it was kind of a no-brainer. But I would be interested to hear from Daniel with creating the data, if you had geospatial in mind.
Yeah, so no, actually, Cambrio's kind of first customer project for stuff was a hedge fund. So in many ways, pretty far from geospatial. Started the company because it was very clear to me that the growth of data was going to increase and accelerate like crazy. There are many sources for this. So imagery is one, text is another, relationships is another. And we see these kind of things where data are really cheap and plentiful, like, social media. It's easy to scrape a bunch of data really quickly. It's still a little bit captive in areas like geospatial, but I think that the analysis patterns are also completely different. So there's this kind of gap that we recognized early on, I think, which is there are some simple analyses that you want to democratize, and then there are some that depend on deep kind of subject matter expertise where that context matters a lot. And we saw this as AI and machine learning being an enormous enabler for that. So the combination of exponential growth of data, major improvements in capability for AI and machine learning, where are the next bottlenecks going to be? It was very clear that this kind of how do we bring it all together and provide a common layer where you can actually operate on this and see through that complexity, very powerful pattern. And that's what we do at Cambrio. So.
Thank you, Dan. I do think that's how geospatial kind of makes a difference. It provides that common layer. Ed, do you want to speak to kind of, was it a chicken or egg, or how did you see it when you kind of got involved in geospatial?
Gotcha. So weather balloons sort of comes back to like a pretty long history. I got started in basically working with weather balloons when I was in high school. I built a CubeSat and I wanted to send it up to space, but I couldn't afford to pay for a Falcon 9 to send it up. So I sent it up on a weather balloon instead. So that sort of morphed into me and my future now CTO Amit basically attaching cameras, attaching sensors, and attaching stuff to it. And we were just wondering, like, how could we essentially commercialize this? Like, how could because at the time we were we didn't really have enough knowledge about the satellite sensing industry at the time, but we knew that satellites were extremely expensive. We knew that there's a huge demand for satellite data, and basically we figured why not use balloons essentially as an alternative, a cheaper alternative to satellites in orbit.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you actually were doing this in high school, Ed. I've known you for a while, and I didn't know that it was high school when this kind of started. His passion. So that's awesome. All right. Well, so not all of you guys are actually, I guess all of you except for Dan maybe, are in St. Louis. But what, we're in the STL Startup Week. What do you find as far as resources, and why did you choose St. Louis? What do you find most valuable? I'm going to start with you, Brad.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in St. Louis since the late 1980s, which is when I was born. so I actually, I was born in St. Louis. I grew up here. It's just an area that I've really grounded my roots. And so starting this company here in 2013, not the late 80s, but starting the company here has actually guided what we do. So it's actually more of a blessing that St. Louis has a big geospatial hub than anything. And so although I did not choose St. Louis, I do see the resources here that I find most valuable are the geospatial companies that are rooted here. Talking with Mark Tagenhorst and Patty Hagen down at T-Rex and Stephen Stone at the Globe Building, they've actually given me a big perspective on what geospatial means in St. Louis and where it's come from. And I think that history there is what's actually directed our company or pivoted our company to do specific training and use of this data and geospatial and just how well they pair together. So that's the resources that we find very valuable. Larger companies like Esri and Maxar and some other companies here that do geospatial data are definitely people that we want to do work with and kind of expose this data, but that's the resources that allow us to do stuff here in St. Louis. It's definitely a city that will be a hub for geospatial and is a hub for geospatial.
Agree wholeheartedly, Brad. Michael, I know you're also originally from St. Louis. Do you want to speak to why did you come back to St. Louis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So like Brad, I'm from St. Louis, grew up in St. Louis. So it's really great coming back and being able to start a company here. One of the things that drew me back to St. Louis was the, kind of the focus on geospatial in the region. There's not very many other places that you can go to bring the combination of, you have academia from SLU and WashU, you have government obviously through NGA, and now you have this commercial presence that's starting to grow. And so being at the nexus of all those things is really important from a geospatial startup perspective. And I expect there will be a lot more geospatial startups being formed and created in St. Louis in the coming years.
I certainly hope so, Michael. So Ed, again, I know, you came kind of from the zoo, but what do you find most valuable and what resources here in St. Louis that you think are here for startups?
Gotcha. So St. Louis was really a strategic choice for us. We have the NGA here. It's much cheaper than the Bay Area. It offers like vast open space for us to conduct test flights. It offers easy access to agriculture, which at the time was our first initial market. So St. Louis also offered like resources like the NGA accelerator, which we were in the inaugural batch of, and the arts grants as well, which we found pretty helpful. And that really did help us get established and set up in the geospatial industry.
All right, perfect, Ed. And so Dan, I know you're not really living here in St. Louis, out of Boston or outside of Boston, but what I guess drew you to kind of become more involved in the St. Louis startup community?
Yeah, so I actually love this question. So much of good business actually comes down to planting seeds, nurturing those seeds, and then eventually they bear fruit. If you do entrepreneurship right, I actually believe that it very reliably bears fruit, but the time it takes to do this could be unpredictable. So those relationships become super important. For years, I've really appreciated relationships with people from St. Louis. I went to school in St. Louis, wife and co-founder. We met in St. Louis, also, school in St. Louis. We have customers in St. Louis. And of course, we're in the NGA Accelerator, which also here is based in St. Louis. So the ties are strong and durable, and those relationships actually are long running and very value added. So, I believe very deeply in the things that are working, you double down on those, and you want to plant more of those kinds of seeds and nurture that. And yeah, we really value the opportunities that have come through St. Louis and also those relationships and the ties back to the things that, academia, other startups, the overall infrastructure for being able to put down some roots and grow.
All right. I don't know if I knew, Dan, that you went to school here, so that's great to hear. And I'm sure our academic community is very excited to hear that too. Yeah, I do think, again, St. Louis, I think that one of the best things about St. Louis is, many cities have geospatial, but in St. Louis, it is such, I guess, a rich community. It's, it's a big deal here. Everybody knows everybody. It's, as far as going on to relationships, Dan, you're exactly right. I think that the relationships are really strong here. You have lots of opportunities to kind of interact and meet up for different things. It's very vibrant in that respect. So almost all of you, except for you, Brad, right, are involved in the NGA accelerators, either the first cohort, Ed, or the second cohort, Michael and Dan. And so I guess one of my questions is, prior to you becoming involved in the NGA accelerator, were you already doing something in defense and intel? And I'm going to start with you, Ed, this time, because I know that you said that your first market was agriculture. Was defense and intel really on your radar when you first started out here?
It was. Defense and intel was always on the radar. Agriculture was just something we had easier access to agricultural customers, but we didn't really have connections or like an idea of how to get involved in the DoD pipeline. And it was really fortunate since we got into the NGA accelerator, because it turns out farmers are really, no offense to anyone who is one, but they're really bad customers when it comes to hard tech or like buying like stuff like a more pie in the sky solution, like weather balloon imagery.
All right, thank you, Ed. Dan, what about you? Were you always involved in that defense and intel sector?
So we did have involvement before the accelerator. So government is interesting, right? Like, it's probably the biggest and potentially most impactful customer one can have for this kind of technology. But it's also a unique customer, and you do have to tailor some of your value proposition and the way that you can show value, like specific, proof points for value for what they do, right? And so that kind of impedance match between what they need and what we have, it is unique for government and for DoD in particular. And so having that access and particularly that motivation from both sides, right? People on that side of the fence are coming to say, we have these problems, what solutions are out there? And we can come in and say, hey, we have these solutions, which problems might be a good fit. I've been very impressed with the degree to which there is overlap, actually. On both sides, there's a very strong pull for this, but it's going to take time. And like, I think it's important to kind of, realize that this is, and again, it's a relationship, right? You want to show capability and double down on the things that are working and maintain those relationships, and it will work. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dan. Just kind of speaking from that Esri perspective, even we have those kind of similar problems, Dan. Like we're like, oh, we've got all these great solutions, and then we're like, oh, let's make them work. Oh, well, they don't work in your network. They don't work, and so then we have to kind of go back, not to the drawing board, but also like go back and figure out how we bring them back so that they do work in that environment. What about you, Michael? Again, were you kind of already thinking you were going to get involved in the defense and intel sector, or was that kind of a surprise when you kind of gotten more involved with the NG Accelerator?
Yeah, so previously I worked for Richard Branson's Virgin Orbit, and then my master's degree was in spatial economics and data analysis. So I've been pretty involved with like USGIF and some of the other not-for-profit organizations that support the geospatial community. So we've always had our eye on what can we do for the national security and geospatial community. But it's interesting, kind of like Dan said, government's a really big customer, a really strong customer, but it's often a challenge for startups to work with government. And so finding unique or creative ways to get in the door, get your foot in the door with government, such as through the NGA Accelerator, is a really valuable opportunity for figuring out how to work and support the national security community a lot better.
Well, and then Michael, I think that this is kind of almost like a follow-up question with that, because again, this is being part of that NG Accelerator. And I think this is kind of speaking to where you were going a second ago. So do you feel that what you're building, these training data sets are more specific to NGA, or do you feel that NGA is really just more going to be that catalyst to help you build something more generic and super useful that you can apply more broadly, again, maybe across sectors?
Yeah, so my opinion is that government always likes dual use technologies, and so things that can help government applications, but then also can have commercial funding and commercial applications as well. It's kind of like a 2-for-1 deal. And so we've always designed our technology at SMERS to be commercial first, and then have kind of a government spin out when there's an interesting overlap in application. But I think you can go both routes. I mean, you look at a company like Palantir that is, heavy defense first, and they've been able to prove out that a venture-backed startup model works great. And then you have a lot of companies that are commercial first, like GM, for example, but then you have like a GM defense subsidiary that focuses on government. And so I think both models work. It just depends on the company.
All right. Dan, did you want to speak to this question at all?
Agree on the dual use case. There's actually maybe some subtle points there that I'll lay out there in case people are interested on a Q&A. But there are things that government can do to lower the barrier for everybody to participate. Example being doing things in the open. This is very non-traditional for government, and I think it is a sign of the future. This is growing and vigorous, and I love it. Another one would be a healthy commercial enterprise is actually a major differentiator just as a national strategy, right? It's something that the US can do exceptionally well. The interaction between academia and applied research into commercial startups, and then growth commercially actually makes the ecosystem stronger. And there's some interplay, I think, as well between government has an interest in getting high quality things for a good price. And one of the ways to drive the price down but increase quality is technical innovation. And so specifically on that crux of what are the ways we can bring technical innovation into these problem sets, I think it's actually one of the rare cases where you have a win-win-win.
Agree wholeheartedly. I mean, even as a larger company, we again have to kind of use that model too, because otherwise, it does drive the price down for everything. And again, that competition kind of also does that. Ed, did you want to speak to this at all as far as, doing something more specific to NGA or something that can be applied more broadly?
I think governments have long sales cycles. From like our experience, a ton of if your business can only service governments, a ton of like VCs and stuff won't let you fund it. And the big reason is governments can be risky. They can have extremely long sales cycles and have absolutely nothing come out of it. So honestly, we're a bit paranoid. We don't like deal exclusively with governments, but we will deal like governments are a big customer, but we often do try to commercialize and like sort of create like a dual use technology because it's simply too much of a risk to only do government.
Yeah, and Tara, not to interrupt, but I think like just to add to this discussion, because I think we're maybe a little bit unique from you three because we're not a part of the NG Accelerator. NGA Accelerator, we've kind of come at this at a different approach and almost in like this backdoor way where we have done third-party development on unclassified portions of DoD contracts and trying to help with some of that immersive training. But coming from my side, like I'm learning a lot from you guys, thinking that, you know, we do have some commercial products that we have tried to slowly sell into the government portions of these different contracts and defenses and grants and things like that. But to see it from like, maybe this is a good intro into getting into the NGA Accelerator for companies who do have a commercial product that could be sellable to the government and getting in and showing how that can be a use case for this. And so instead of having something that could just be, you know, used on both ways, starting here or starting there works in both ways. So I just found that interesting learning from you guys. So thanks for sharing.
No, agreed, Brad. And I think, you know, I mean, I guess it's not all about NGA, but I do think that NGA does have some of that specific. They are trying to go commercial first if they can, because they do know, again, that is going to be driving down the cost. They're going to be getting kind of more for their money going forward here. So, all right, Brad, I'm pivoting away from the NGA discussions. We can bring you back in more. No. All right. So actually what I'm going to be asking, and this is, you know, I'll start with you, Brad, but where do you see yourself pivoting more for, or where do you see more of that room for growth in the future? I know you haven't been as involved, but you still have done some DoD contracts, and you know, you started out in that architecture and engineering kind of thing, but how are you planning to kind of move more across sectors? Like what's your kind of growth plan for pivoting in the future? Yeah,
I appreciate it. And we can always talk about the NGA Accelerator. It's an awesome program that I've heard a lot about and I definitely want to be a part of. But as far as like how I see us pivoting for like room for growing in the future, this is Geospatial's semi new to us compared to the other industries. We've only been into it for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And so trying to figure out how we pivot into this industry and use our base IP and our technology that, like I said from the beginning, always pairs well with these geospatial industry products. That's kind of what I've been kind of researching and studying throughout the past year. So actually, we've been right now continually trying to skip those POC projects, those proof of concept projects, and the small entry projects with companies like Maxar and CAE and hopefully Esri, Terra, and just these large players in the government contracts that allow us to use our developments to solve these issues and to grow the ability to be selected on these larger projects and to take our commercial product and form it in a way that does work in these different networks and so on. So these relationships, like Dan's been hinting at this whole time, are everything to us. I mean, we want to develop useful and cool applications for the industries, and these partners allow for that to happen. So it's never for us been something that you know, we need to develop this in order to get big in the geospatial. It's just always been, you know, how can we use our immersive technologies for this application? And one of the big things that I've been pursuing, and this is a big portion to your answer, is like how we're going to pivot, how we're going to grow in the future in geospatial, is we've been working pretty hard trying to get a sponsorship for some of the classified projects so we can be a PI on some of these grants, and so we can, you know, really take these to the next level. So that's something I'll be, you know, keeping an eye out and continuing conversations with some of our partners to see how we can do that and really take this technology deep into the geospatial industry and NGA specifically.
All right, thank you, Brad. And I do think that another reality got really highlighted during the last GeoIn conference. For anybody that wasn't there, like they did a really amazing experience that I know that T-Rex supported to try to get out there for that geo discovery experience that Thursday night. So I think you did get a lot of really good exposure to a lot of people in this community. So crossing fingers there. So, all right. So I'm going to go to you next, Dan. As far as where do you see yourself more pivoting for room for growth in the future? How are you planning to get more cross-sector exposure as you plan to go forward?
Actually, so the cross-sector exposure thing is not that hard actually for the kind of stuff we do. The growth of data and AI machine learning kind of applications is kind of naturally cross-sector. So it's actually more a question of focus and finding the most potent applications of stuff rather than trying to spread out. An interesting, so one of the things I think we all depend on, as Michael was getting to, right, is there's this dependency on high quality data. Like, how are you going to find something that you're looking for if it doesn't exist in that stream? So this dependency on data is really important, and I think you've got this nailed with increasing sources for this. Brad, we both depend on the same kind of upstream, right? So for Cambrio in particular, this gets really interesting when you start combining different sources of data together and doing these data fusion kind of projects. So imagine that you can see a wildfire from space, and if you're looking with an optical satellite, you see smoke, but you can't see below the smoke. If you look with infrared, you can see the fire line, and if you look with radar, you can actually see stuff on the ground. And so the combination of infrared for fire line, synthetic aperture radar to see the stuff that's changing on the ground, and then optical to give context for what you're actually seeing kind of, as you zoom in and out. That's a really potent combination. And there's no single upstream provider who can actually do all of that, right? So now you have this integration project across multiple different data feeds, and you have to fuse and co-register and frame this problem properly. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we attack at Cambrio. So as these data sources grow, as complexity grows, and as you want to mix and match and do the data fusion, this is a natural growth opportunity for us.
I love that, Dan. In fact, I want to hear more on that, just so you know.
Okay,
because,
all right.
Because that does, I mean, I don't have to hear it right now, right this minute by any means, but I'm just saying, I think that what you're talking about is so interesting. And I guess I just want to remind everybody, I'm kind of coming down to a couple more questions here, but feel free. I have one question in the Q&A so far, but make sure that if you've got more questions, especially for stuff like that, Dan, because that was interesting. And just kind of hearing you speak to that, I think that that's like some use case that would be very interesting to many parties for lots of different things. But feel free to go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A button or the Q&A portion. All right, so Ed, so again, I know you started off in ag, you also always had NGA or the DoD kind of in your radar, but where do you go next? Or are you just trying to kind of more capitalize on what you're doing already? Or where do you see your future going for Stratodyne?
More into the analytics software space. So pretty much we have a massive repositories of satellite data, imagery, and all sorts of testing data and training data that can be essentially used to run analytics, train machine learning models, and do all sorts of things. And that's going to be a major strength that we'll have going into the future. But in terms of industry, we've really shifted focus away from ag and into working with large enterprises, working with government agencies and defense agencies. And I think that's sort of where we're going to stick it for the most part.
All right, thank you, Ed. And Michael, where do you see yourself going for the future, or pivoting, or staying in that same lane?
Yeah, so at Submerse, we're really focused on kind of what's the next generation of AI. And for us, it's improving our synthetic data technology and being able to create more realistic images that have a greater variety of labels, and really just executing on our technical roadmap. And so that's where we see it going. It's a little bit hard to say on the commercial strategy side, because we have interests from multiple sectors. And so we actually don't know yet what's going to be the most lucrative and rewarding sector to go after. So, we're going to examine every opportunity, but we don't know yet. And that's kind of exciting.
All right, thanks, Michael. So Dan, one of the things that we had talked about when we were kind of preparing for this was more of some of those data sharing and what startups can do together to kind of, collaborate more. Like, And you kind of gave us just like that little like trailer for it with, you know, talking about the fact that no one provider can be doing all of these different things. I guess, do you want to expand on that anymore about like, what do you foresee, or how do you suggest to go forward and do more collaborative data sharing?
Yeah, so I'm gonna put in a plug for something. There's a problem which is underappreciated in the world, which is illegal and underregulated and underreported fishing. So if you eat fish, there's about a 20 to 25% chance when you eat a fish that it actually was IUU. This is enormous. It's multiple billions of dollars every year of economic damage. And it basically ends up being the big, powerful countries are extracting the natural resources from other countries, right? This is a very difficult problem to crack at scale. So you have to be able to see through weather and monitor things globally and use these kinds of intelligence sources like satellite imagery to be able to get a beat on this. It's also a problem where if we can solve it together in the open, everybody benefits, and it neutralizes that kind of big country squatting on a small country kind of dynamic. And so I love this kind of dual use problem framing where we can do environmental monitoring from shared open data with shared open kind of benchmarks and challenges for things, and use this to actually shine a light, right, on these behaviors that are globally bad and then improve them. And so Cambrio actually collaborated with some DoD organizations and a nonprofit partner called Global Fishing Watch to turn out by far the world's biggest and best data set for these kinds of things. It's open. You can actually compete and win some money if you're interested. Feel free to follow up with me. If my email is not there, I'm Dan at Cambrio. Or you can actually just Google for XView3, which is the website is iuu.xview.us. And if you go there, check it out, you can get data for free. You can see how you want to engage. Whatever your part is of this ecosystem, we're interested to have you and know about you in there. And I think this ties together a lot of these threads we've been talking about, right? How do we lower the barrier for smart, innovative people to engage? How do we have dual use technologies get enabled? How do we grow the commercial ecosystem around this? How do we solve a problem that matters? And what's that bridge to show capability that might be interesting to commercial and government use? So
I love that, Dan. And it looks like we're getting some requests. If you want to go ahead and put some of those links and or for all of you so that we're not doing it for you, put some of your emails if you don't mind being followed up with after this into the chat so that everybody has access to them. Maybe your company name, your name, and then your email address. But I think, Dan, I'm already seeing in the chat a lot of requests for some of what you just referred to. So I think that's fantastic. Does anybody else want to add on to data sharing or kind of more that collaborative system for the startups and how you guys can be working together better in that respect? Anyone? No? Okay. All right. Well, then I have a few questions here in the Q&A. So I'm going to jump over here for a second. All right. So this one is from an anonymous attendee, so I don't know who it's from. I think you may have spoken to a little bit of this already, but what resources for entrepreneurial support and funding have you tapped into already? And are there specific geospatial entrepreneurship funding resources that you have leveraged? And I'm going to go ahead and start with Dan. Do you want to, oops, it'd be right before you drank. Do you want to, I guess anybody else can jump in too here, but has anybody taken advantage of some of the entrepreneurial support, whether it's St. Louis or just outside of St. Louis, and or funding resources? I think all of you have done some, but Dan?
So the most recent one is this NGA accelerator. So this is a great example of it helps refine problem space, it helps access a market, and it did come with a grant attached. So yeah, okay. All of the above.
Perfect. So I think we've got 3 NGA accelerators, but I know we also have some Arch grants winners. Does Brad, were you an Arch grant winner?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll definitely give a plug for Arch grants. I mean, I think they're very interested in prioritizing geospatial companies. In fact, I'm in their office currently going through one of our first meetings. And so they're an extremely great program, not only for the funding, and it's great that it's equity free and that they're helping with funding, but the network that they provide and the context that they have, the business advice that they have, it really helps streamline you into a direct pathway to where you can realize revenue and you can start to bootstrap your own progress there. So I think as far as entrepreneurial support, Arch Grants is phenomenal and definitely one of the leading St. Louis grants that you can get here. So
Perfect. Thank you, Brad. Michael, Ed, have you found any others that you want to recommend or talk about, Michael?
Yeah, so to add that, Arch Grants has been phenomenal, super helpful, not only in just the equity free grant, but also kind of like Brad said, the connections and getting to know people, not just in St. Louis, but also in the Midwest more broadly, has been super helpful. And then there's a few other, there's the T-Rex like GeoSeed program, which Submerse hasn't done, but I know there's a few companies out there that have engaged with that. And then of course, it's always great to engage with like WashU and SLU and some of the other institutions that are putting together, I think UMSL's putting together a geospatial focus program. So I think we'll see more grants and other opportunities come out of those.
Perfect. And I think you led right into Ed, because I think Ed is a winner of one of those GeoSeed grant programs.
Yeah,
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so GeoSeed is a really interesting program. I think it's fantastic, really, because it basically enables research institutions to partner with local geospatial companies in the region, sort of like a mini STTR program almost. And so we've partnered with St. Louis University to study, I believe, river pollution in the Mississippi River. And I think a ton of the other projects that we've looked at all have like really strong impact on the St. Louis community. And it's pretty much, I think it's really a fantastic like triad of everything. You're bringing like academia, local institutions and nonprofits together with local startups, and you're helping them build out projects and give them small grants and contracts to do stuff that improves the lives of other people in St. Louis.
So it's win-win-win-win-win, right?
Essentially.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ed. Anything else that you guys want to recommend before I move on to the next question? For other things you guys have been able to tap into? All right. So this one is a question from, I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but his name is Mark Munsell. He might just be kind of involved in this community. But the question is, do we see a breakthrough in space-based computer vision? Most computer vision experts say, I need high resolution imagery, more training data, and more compute. Is this just a matter of squeezing every ounce of juice in 15 years of deep learning technology? Or is there a breakthrough out there that's looming that you guys can foresee on the horizon? Anybody want to speak to that? Dan.
Oh man. Hey, Mark. Yeah, there's a breakthrough, and I'd be happy to show it to you. So I think actually, so I mean, it's a really good question right on the nose. So there are some problems that advance in these like, revolutions where you have this big jump. And then we've seen this actually in machine learning, of course. And then there are some that actually invest by economic disruption of each of the individual dependencies and components. And I think we're crossing over from a phase where, it's going to be characterized by some new model, right? To one that's characterized by economic disruption and just like executing repeatedly on tasks that matter. So my take on this actually is the next disruption that's happening here is buying down the complexity that an analyst actually encounters, being able to admit what they need to trade the model and getting more stuff in the loop. So we need to connect more feedback loops on this and turn the crank on more of these domain-specific, contextually aligned kind of tasks. So, and I think that this actually aligns to kind of like the academic state of the art too. There are couples into contrastive learning and how do we get human feedback on the part of a problem that's on the margin for these kind of, computer vision decisions. And I think this is academically really interesting and also an opportunity to, make that economic disruption very like task aligned. So I do actually, but I don't think it's going to be this like enormous jump where you put a new model in and you suddenly get a disruption and huzzah, we don't need people anymore. I think it's going to be more like, there's an incremental and investable way to productize these things and connect feedback loops. And it's going to happen. It's just, we got to do the work. So. All
right, thanks, Dan. Does anybody else want to jump in on that one? Or did Dan do a good enough job on that one? I think he did a pretty good job. All right. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So I think that one is done. So we have another question from Peter Llewellyn. Does anyone attending, are you aware of Teledyne Brown that has a platform on the space station that they rent access to so that data can be collected from there? Multiple agencies have now used the equipment there, but not sure if it's public or useful, or if a future client could provide information on time on their data acquisition payload. Is anybody familiar with that or want to speak to it? It doesn't look like it, Peter, just so you know. I guess we have some unfamiliars on this. So yeah, but he did put a link in there if we want to check it out later. All right. So any other questions? Or I do have, I was going to ask about that GOC, but we've already talked about that now. So I do have kind of more of a question. Did any of you receive any advice? Okay, and I'm going to maybe start with Brad here on this one, just to kind of give you a heads up on this. Did any of you receive some advice early on that really seemed to steer your ambitions for your startup? Or do you have any advice to other startups or people that may be listening in, or lessons learned that you want to share about your journey with your startup so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is one of my favorite parts about being an entrepreneur, is being able to help other entrepreneurs and also receive help from other entrepreneurs. I think that there's a great network that we have here. And this being Startup Week is definitely a good time to address this. My number one advice that I usually give to people, and I'll give it twofold. I'll give the advice to others and then what I received as advice. But the advice to others of what I'd say is just get started in some fashion. So whether that looks like, you know, if you already have an idea on your startup and you're just not sure if it's going to work, or you're not sure what the potential is, just get started in some fashion, even if it's just creating something and starting to generate something that you can start using, collecting data or collecting some sort of proof of concept. That's my advice, because what I did for a long time was see a potential in a certain industry or in a certain field and just dream about it. And be like, oh man, that'd be so cool if we could do this, if we could do this. And it took me years before I was like, all right, I'm going to jump in and do it. And so my advice is just get started, because I think that from a work-life balance standpoint, you'll be much more satisfied and happy if you just start something and try something. So usually the freezing decision is the part that holds people up. So that's my advice to others who have something. As far as advice is what I've received on how to steer something, this is more of a general concept as well, but trust is everything. Like, I mean, I think in any of my client relationship that I talk to, I'm very open about if we've had experience with it, if we haven't had experience with it, if it's feasible, if it's not, if we can do it, if we can't. And that has taken me so much further than just saying that we can do something, finding a way to do it and delivering something that's subpar. So I think that advice from somebody that is just like, be trustworthy, be very communicative with your client, be very communicative with what you can and can't do. So more like general business advice for an entrepreneur, not necessarily geospatial related, but they're very, very, important to me as we run our company. Is I want to be a trustworthy guy, and I'm just going to get started on things that I see potential in.
I mean, I love that, Brad, just because, especially that, well, starting off, just doing it. And I think the trustworthy, because again, your reputation, like once it's sacrificed, is kind of, it's gone. It's really hard to get it back. And especially, St. Louis is fantastic in so many ways. And again, so supportive of this geospatial ecosystem, but we are a small pond, right? So everybody knows people. So if you did deliver that subpar, or if you didn't really follow through with some of your commitments, everybody's going to know it. I mean, it's kind of like news travels fast in this kind of like a smaller and networked community where we talk too much, I guess, for things like that to not be shared. So I think that's very good advice. And again, just maybe, just communicating that, and I guess at least talking through it and performing to what you can do. So Dan, did you want to speak to, again, any advice early on that you received or motivating you to start your own company, or any advice you have for other startups?
Yeah, actually. So this is kind of a twofold thing. There was one mentor in particular, not to be too on the nose. We were talking through. So I was trying to figure out what's the path to funding for one of these early projects where we can just try it and show that it works. And it was very frustrating because some of the things we depended on just like were not what we needed, right? Like not the right data, you know, et cetera. And the comment was, this is a waste of time, right? Like you are beating your head on blockers that aren't going to resolve anytime soon. The leverage that you have can be applied to a different problem set and be 100 times more valuable than the one that you're working on. So like, you know, get out of here, right? And like go do that. And like, you know, that was extremely liberating for me. And it was coupled with and if you fail, let me know and we will catch you. And like that coupling between the two, it was very powerful. And so you know, everybody gets started with some kind of a champion on a good project for something that matters for the champion and makes them look good, but also they're taking a risk on you as this first thing. And so having a mentor community who's willing to say like, go for it. And if you fail well, we got you, right? It's really important.
I love that. Thanks, Dan. Ed, do you want to, you know, talk about again something that, you know, kind of motivated you or helped steer your company and your startup development, or any advice you have for other startups or people that might be looking to jump into that?
Gotcha. I mean, I guess I'm not really exactly qualified to start giving out advice yet, but one thing I would just say is advice. I mean, ideas are pretty much useless. Your idea is worth $0. In college, I met so many people who said they wanted to be the next Steve Jobs. They had some fantastic idea for some app or some whatever crazy thing they had, and they never actually executed anything about it. I would ask, how many potential users have you talked to? What have you done to execute on or validate this idea? And they would say, nothing, because I can't code, or nothing because I don't have a co-founder, or I'm waiting for people to give me money. Which at that point I would say, why don't you learn to code? Or why would a technical co-founder join you? Or why would anyone give you money for that sense? And that's something that's pretty endemic in the startup world. There's a ton of people who like have the idea that they want to be a CEO of some high-growing tech company, but they don't want to actually get started on a journey that sets them on that path. Another huge thing, just use your mentors, I guess, use your network. So many times I sent people cold emails, and when I could have gotten a warm introduction, and that really did screw me up a lot in the early days. I sure just didn't want to wait. I just would shoot out cold emails like left and right. Almost got my account flagged as a spammer when I was raising my angel round, because I had no access to angel investors. I was sending like 2,000 emails in like a few months, but yeah.
No, I like that. And honestly, I think that's really like, you know, the good idea fairies and ideas without execution or validation. I mean, you know, while they might be nice, they're not making you any money, right? They're not making anybody any money. And I think that, because I have heard a lot of people kind of go, oh, I want to do this. It's going to be fantastic. You know, how are you going to get started? Do you know how to do that? Oh, no.
Yeah,
But
I mean, the idea is like, you don't have to be making money. At least know who's going to give you money, and at least have a plan for them to give you money.
No, I think that's a really very valid point, Ed. Michael, do you want to talk about anything that kind of helps spur you to get your startup started?
Yeah. So I think some of the other founders have touched on the important topic of like getting started and actually like diving with both feet and actually executing on something and getting stuff done. But I think it's also important to, you know, one of the good pieces of advice that I heard is don't give up too early. And so a lot of people will have some adversity, some kind of challenge, and they'll give up like right away. And I know like when I was raising our first round of funding, there were a lot of days where I was like, man, this is not going to work. I should, you know, I even applied for other jobs. I was like, okay, I got to have a backup plan. And then finally, you know, we found the right investor and made it work. But it's really important to not give up too soon. Give yourself a chance to make it work, and you know, really just shoot for the stars that way.
All right. Well, I think you guys are very inspirational, all of you, and kind of what you've done. And I think I love hearing about how you want to do more data sharing, Dan. And I think, you know, I was thinking about what you're talking about with the fishing, and I was like, I think that's kind of what Odine Serrano has been doing with a lot of that Combating Wildlife Trafficking Institute, because you're not just solving it for that. There's other reasons why you're bringing this data and you're making and exposing it, right? And so I think that illegal fishing is it's a similar problem, or kind of almost like maybe underneath that same umbrella, really. So I love the fact that you're talking about that you're wanting to get involved. I'm seeing tons of comments in here about, so you guys need to all check this chat, because people are already reaching out. They want to talk about ag with Edward, and they're loving all of this stuff as far as the data and everything else goes. So I agree. I think everything has been fantastic. Does anybody have any closing thoughts that you want to share before we give this a wrap? Anyone on the call? Dan, you're off mute.
Yeah, and y'all should jump in too. I want to say on the question of how can we engage other companies who want to work together on stuff, follow up. I really will have this conversation with you. I promise that we will learn something mutually, which is what this is all about. And then secondly, we're hiring. So if you're interested in doing this kind of thing, like for real, and learning a lot real fast on some of these applied problems, please do reach out. And I think these are the most exciting problems in the world right now. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I'm on the coattails of Dan here, but I also would just love to like sit and brainstorm with you guys. I'm more of a dreamer, so I love to just like hear what your problems are and just start toying back and forth with you on what some solutions could be. So I would love to do that with you. And then also to the other panelists here, I don't know if I know I'm connected to you guys, but we should set up a time and just talk, because there's so many synergies here. Like when Dan's talking about the wildfire and like recognizing the stuff and the different layers, I'm just thinking here like, man, I could use that. We could do a training on an edge case that's very dangerous in real life, but is not dangerous in virtual reality. And then I'm sure Ed's sitting there like, I can get a lot more accurate data with our balloon method. Then, obviously Michael can train things synthetically, which is you don't have to sit and wait for something. You can just synthetically train data over data over data. So I mean, there's all of us will work together, and so I just love to get to know you guys as well. And to the startup people out there who are interested and have ideas, reach out to all of us. I know these guys, and I know that they would enjoy an email from you. So reach out to us and let us kind of brainstorm with you. It'd be fun.
I love that, Brad. Ed?
Yeah, I mean, definitely reach out. Like we're working on a ton of new projects at the moment. Some of them are sort of secret. We're already talking about them a lot. But if you have any interest in like space tech or like remote sensing, Earth observation, definitely do reach out, because the product is really dynamic. And I would love to collaborate with you on like potential projects in the future.
Super. Thank you, Ed. Michael? Last closing thoughts.
This has been a great panel. So thanks for everyone's time and all the attendees.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Well, and I want to thank all of you attendees as well. And I want to thank all of the panelists. You guys were a lot of fun today, and I look forward to it. So one of the things that we do have here in St. Louis is the USGIF St. Louis Area Working Group. I think all of you have been participating in one way or another. I've already invited to next week's meeting. We have a meeting next Wednesday. It's our final meeting of the year. I know Michael's going to be speaking, and Daniel's going to be talking a little bit more about his company. So if you want to hear more about that, come out to our SLOG meeting. I know Ed has presented before. Brad, I'd like you to come and present it sometime if you'd be interested as well. But so I'm inviting all of these guys to come, but if you're a startup and you want to kind of get more involved, come out to our SLOG meetings, or reach out. Again, this is our last, but thank you attendees for being here and providing great questions and supporting the STL Startup Week. This is our last speaker session for 2021, taking December off. But please be on the lookout for 2022, the GeoInnovation National Speaker Series schedule. We will also be sending out a survey to all of the attendees for the entire year to kind of gain your feedback and see what you'd like to see differently in 2022 and maybe some ideas. I also want to put a quick plug in, I am with Esri. Right after this session, as part of the STL Startup Week, there is a Bring the Power of Maps and Location Services to your application session right after this. It is virtual, but they're going to be talking about our Esri Startup Program. I know that we've talked to many of you, or many of you already are involved with it. So just to kind of hear about it, if you are doing something in geospatial, it makes sense just to kind of find out a little bit more, see if it applies to you, and if you want to be participating in that. So anyway, I guess, final thoughts. Thanks so much for joining us today and have a fantastic rest of your STL Startup Week. All right, take care. Bye-bye.